know who they are, who will spin the subject in the direction of it being an alien threat for the purpose of a totalitarian superstate uniting the world against aliens, which is a total hoax and nonsense. And that's, it's like the movie Independence Day or The War of the Worlds or whatever. Like when Will Smith goes, let's kick alien butt, right? That, that whole script was like out of CIA central scripting casting. Not that Will Smith is, he's a great guy, but it was reached out to us and very interested.
Okay, you let me know if that makes sense, because that's a little above my pay grade over here, all right? We are investigators. We're not physicists, scientists, or chemists, or biologists, or, well, anything of consequence. Honestly, we're just reading documents. But you guys definitely chime in if you know what that means. A superior form of colonizing will have to be conceived. That could be a kind of tutelage, possibly through the tacit approval of the United Nations. But would the United Nations legally have the right of allowing such tutelage over us in such a fashion?
Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with all your friends. Go do it right now. x.com/shotdownmine. Come find me.
My view of it at this point is we're going to have to get serious against these criminal elements. But if you're carrying water for them, if you're one of their shills or cutout, whether you're in Congress, the Senate, the public, or someone on your podcast, they need to be arrested and tried for treason and sedition against the United States. I'm going on the record and say that. And this is seriously being discussed. So I'm issuing this as a warning. This chicanery and nonsense, one way or another, is going to come to a screeching halt, because there are people, not just me, I've been saying this for 30 years. You go back and see what I saw in the meetings with the Clinton people back in 95. 93, 94, 95. I briefed the CIA director for Clinton in December 13th of 93.
Wow.
So, I mean, before probably you were born. But the point I'm making is that this is a really huge problem. So even if you're a low-level operative, you're just carrying water for this messaging, right? And disinforming the public or blocking bills, you are part of a criminal operation. And RICO, Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization, conspiracy, can be invoked and grab them all up.
Jesse Michels, Stephen Greer, UFO secrets are held by a global cabal. 3 hours, 40 minutes. It's a banger. It's a slapper. It got a lot of attention this week, as you would expect from anything that Greer does. You think that UFO Twitter and ufology would be all over it. I think the reason that it got a lot of attention to start with is because Jesse Michels published, commercials, trailers, teasers, and they were of Stephen Greer getting upset with Jesse. And I think, at the early part of the week on Tuesday or Wednesday, when I first started seeing the memes or the Twitter posts, or maybe the first couple like vetted or whatever, it seemed like they were making it seem that they were arguing, that Jesse was telling Greer that he was wrong, or challenging Greer. Then the clips came out of him saying, "Hey, don't interrupt me." And the first "don't interrupt me" pops out pretty early. Like I didn't write down when anything, but it popped out pretty early, and it was like, "Don't interrupt me, let me finish." And I don't think there's a bunch of them. So pretty early, like around the 20-minute, around 30-minute mark. He says it a few other times. So maybe 6 times total. And I don't think Jesse was ever really interrupting him. It's like it seems like you watch it, it's gonna be hard to watch it like a bunch of times. Like unless you're like a real dedicated Greer person, I don't. It's kind of hard to ever watch him for very long. Anyways, and this one doesn't disappoint in that regard. He doesn't really say anything that you probably haven't heard him say before. Probably. You know, he talks about he just had his appendix surgery the day before. He just had his appendix out. He doesn't take any painkillers. He's a monster. He's a beast. He's a machine. He's a fucking machine. He says people tell him he's a fucking machine. Says he works out a lot, lifts 700 pounds, tells Jesse not to interrupt him. So, you know, Greer will like jump from topic to topic to topic, and it's really from person to person. It's like little stories about people, about celebrities, ufology celebrities, but also other celebrities. And so he kind of does that. Jesse, a couple times, I guess maybe he does kind of like interrupt him because maybe they're kind of rambling a little bit, and he's like, "Hey, I want to get back to this. I want to hear about this story." And that's when Greer's like, "Well, I'm trying to tell you, but you keep interrupting me. Or you keep distracting." I think towards the very end, he says at some point, maybe even more than once, he says, "Well, you're distracting me. It's your fault that we're rambling." So it seems like Greer's doing his normal thing. He's saying his normal things. He's doing his normal kind of like ramble and name drop thing. You know, he says that UFO secrets are held by global cabal. I don't. You know, what's he on to talk about? So like all the things, like look, there's like 100 topics that'll pop up right here. Like he doesn't really have like an agenda, like what he's gonna lay out about UFO secrets being held by a global cabal. And so, anyways, it's like Greer kind of showed up already unhappy with Jesse Michels because Jesse Michels is friends with Elizondo. That's the only like rational explanation I could come up with myself for why Greer was like so mad at Jesse Michels. And I said before, like on other Jesse interviews, that it seems like his guests aren't very like happy with him, you know, and like they end like a little bit before the hour mark because they're kind of like annoyed by him. It's not all of them, and it's only a couple, and they're always old guys. But you know, he's filming a podcast. I'm sure they have all sorts of interruptions going on. They had to do the sound and pick the angles and all this stuff, you know. So I don't know. Like I think if you watch it, that you'd be kind of surprised also. Like you actually sit and watch it. Of like, why is Greer getting pissed off? And especially this is 4 hours, so if it doesn't seem like he's getting like mad and then more angry and then more pissed. It just seems like he kind of like suddenly is unhappy with Jesse, and then he keeps that same kind of like level boiling for Jesse the whole time, just like, no, I'm pissed at you. You're too young. You're not listening. You already have assumptions. You hang out with wrong people. You're brainwashed. Like he throws a lot of shots like right square into Jesse's face, really. And Jesse just goes, I think every single time he just goes, uh-huh. Uh-huh. It's not a bad Greer interview. I still think Greer should like pass the torch to somebody else to do his PR. They talk about so many individual topics I don't think very much of it is really because of the questions that Jesse's throwing out there. They're very few. Mostly it's just Jesse kind of like agreeing with Dr. Greer. Kind of agrees with him, and then he brings up other stuff. He's like, "Oh, and what about this? And do you know about this guy? And what about what this guy says about this and the other thing?" You know, he's just kind of like UFO broing with him, sort of, or trying to. And Greer doesn't like that. I don't know. I don't know why, but he didn't really like that. But so they still end up talking about a lot of stuff, and that's why I say, like, for 4 hours, if he was pissed at him for interrupting him all the time, like, I don't know how they got past 45 minutes, you know. There's a couple times in there where maybe when he's talking about Teal, and there's another guy, Hell Put Off, where he's saying, I know these things about those guys, really specific things, where Jesse's like, oh yeah, how do you know that? Do you have any backup on that? And Greer's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So it's hard to say that it's a good watch. I mean, it's 4 hours. So have you ever watched 4 hours of Dr. Stephen Greer before? Have you? Like, good job. You did a good job. I'll give you a badge for doing that. Now, was it 4 hours consecutive? Because that's like an extra thumbs up. Like, that's a different color badge or something. If there were individual hours, you still get the badge, but it's just like a blue badge instead of like a gold or something. So, you know, it is 4 good hours of Greer, even with him talking shit straight to Jesse's face constantly for being basically Elizondo's pal. It does, when he's talking shit to him about Elizondo, it does come off like he's talking shit about someone's girlfriend. Like he's got this thing about Elizondo. He's very unhappy about it. But you know, I mean, he just hates the state twisting everything to lead us all into a fake war against the benevolent aliens. So he has a lot of rage against that. Because aliens are good. And he says, a fun thing that he says in here, and I think it's way towards the end, is he says that the aliens are good because they're probably like he was when he was an ER surgeon. You know, the aliens sometimes have to do stuff that the person receiving it probably wouldn't think of as good. They would think of it as like terrifying, but they're really getting heart surgery, or they're getting their tuberculosis scars cured, etc. Or they're getting their baby stolen.
That a species of Homo sapiens might have established themselves as an independent nation on another celestial body in our solar system and evolved culturally independently from ours. Obviously, this possibility depends on many circumstances, whose conditions cannot yet be foreseen. However, we can make a study of the basis on which such a thing might have occurred. Okay, so now, basically, they'll start speculating on what if humans lived on another celestial body in this solar system, i.e. Mars or Venus, and grew up with a different cultural society. How would that affect their laws? And now we get into some speculative territory, which I'm all about. In the first place, living conditions on these bodies, let's say the moon or the planet Mars, would have to be such as to permit a stable and, to a certain extent, independent life from an economic standpoint.
Area 52, Chris Ramsay, Aliens and Albert Einstein, Secret Document, Debriefed, Episode 33. We are at, I believe, about Albert Einstein. And then he's got a lot of these in here, right? Like he just did number 4. Oh, there's part 1. We just finished part 4 of the Lacerda files. So we did 4 of those. There's number 1, and then there's a whole bunch of others, different interviews. And I think it starts right about there. Right in all of them, he's saying, this is fiction. Don't believe any of this. We're going to suspend our disbelief as we read this fun fictional story. Go. And he's just been on everyone else's podcast and his own podcast saying, hey, when the magician says that this part right here is unimportant and not real, that's the important real part. So he's been building up kind of a super interesting canon of suspend your disbelief with the alien interviews, and then Lacerda, and then now he's reading this document. He's read some others, right? The Wilson Davis document and others that could be hoaxes. But let's read through it anyways because it's going to be fun. And this is going to be required, right? It's super short, so it's short and it's fun. Short and fun ufology is required for sure. Chris Ramsay always does a great job. Great production. It's not a lot of production, it's just great production. He knows how to tell a story. And then we, get to listen to him read the story. And this story is about it's about Albert Einstein, right? And he says at first, in early encounters with Albert Einstein and people who documented their encounters with Einstein, he would say things like, hey, I'm really interested in UFOs. And some events that happen, like a meteor or whatever. And interviewers and people from universities went to Einstein and said, what do you think? And he said, it's really interesting. I'm really interested in aliens and UFOs and things that happen in space. And then later Einstein, when events would happen and people would go to him and ask him what his opinion was about the meteor or the flying saucers, he would say stuff like, oh, that's interesting, but I don't really have any interest in anything that's UFO or space related or whatever. So he says, Ramsay says, there was a real change in Einstein. It seems weird. It seems weird that the guy that we hold up in our mythology is like the smart guy, the smartest guy. When they would ask him about UFOs when he was like younger, he would say, yeah, UFOs are cool. But later when they'd ask him about UFOs, when Ramsay says, you would assume and we think that he's probably in on something. Even peripherally. Because maybe one of his buddies, like Oppenheimer, just asked him for his opinion on something or some things. And maybe if he was asking him about nukes, that he might have asked him about UFOs also, or aliens also. But there's definitely, as far as publicly, as far as officially goes, Einstein kind of seems to change from young Einstein to old Einstein. From young Einstein saying UFOs are cool, old Einstein saying I'm not interested in UFOs, and somewhere in there we're pretty sure that he probably got some exposure to the topic officially, even if it was just through his other scientist buddies. And basically Ramsay's saying that the reason that Einstein would be saying, I don't want nothing to do with those UFOs, is because he was talking to his scientist buddies about UFOs. And probably, specifically, Oppenheimer. And so then that's what we got for most of this episode, is what they find and propose to be a letter from Oppenheimer to Eleanor Roosevelt about UFOs. And he reads through it very carefully and, talks about all the different things you'd have to consider. And so it's all the ufology basics, like who are the aliens, where did they come from, what's up with their technology. And then it kind of gets to, why are they here? What do we do with them? For some reason, it seems that Oppenheimer is assuming that the aliens aren't from really far away. They're either from Mars or Venus or somewhere else in the solar system. Or else why would they be here? Why else would they be here? And that they don't seem to be assuming that they're from Earth. But at some point during the letter reading, they do say, well, what if the aliens aren't really aliens? They're just other humans. So they're other humans from another part of the solar system, from an earlier time in humanity that went out to the solar system and is now coming back for some reason. And so that's what they get into here. All the legal and ethical questions involved with dealing with these new people. And that there's no real mechanism on planet Earth to deal with people from outside of planet Earth. That you couldn't even use the UN. Here's a paragraph or two on that, because the UN doesn't have those kind of powers. The UN is not really a government. So if anyone's going to make an agreement with the aliens, whether they're aliens or other humans, that they wouldn't really have authority to make that agreement on behalf of all the humans, because there's way more than one human government on the planet. And they never agree on anything. So they kind of go through the different options. How could they do it? And another kind of jump that happens at some point is because they say, well, one of the main reasons that the aliens would have a right of occupation or colonizing parts of Earth is because there's not an Earth government. There's not a central authority that could tell them no. So that gives them the right. The hinting that's going on at the end is that the UFO program was hidden in plain sight at the Department of Defense, and that the Department of Defense did UFOs compartmentalized. So Navy had their own UFOs, the Air Force had their own UFOs, the Army had their own UFOs, the DoD had its own UFO programs. And then there was also privatization that happened. And they sent the UFOs to Lockheed. But on top of all that, there was a centralized, hidden UFO program in the Department of Energy under Oppenheimer. And that that is in plain sight and hidden, but they didn't talk about it. And those are the men in black. Those are the guys making the decisions about where all the different little pieces of all the different UFOs are and go, and who has them, what's privatized and not privatized. But that's kind of the untold, undocumented home of the conspiracies, the Department of Energy and Oppenheimer. And so I like the long story, the long con that we have going on from Chris Ramsay with the different interviews that he's been reading through and telling us these are fictional, suspend your disbelief. 4chan Whistleblower Part 2. And so he's got 10 of those now. And they're all in his voice, they're all in his production, they're all highly entertaining, they're all excellent. This is the most recent, and this one is, it says Albert Einstein believes, but it's really about the hidden ufology program being hidden into the Department of Energy and the misdirection of pretending to hide it in the Department of Defense. And since the Department of Defense actually has all these hidden quote-unquote black programs in each of its little parts, that really helps hide it, because people have been basically looking there 100% and have barely even looked over in the Department of Energy or at Oppenheimer, who was good at keeping things secret, was able to kind of keep the nuclear stuff secret for the most part, and use some of the same techniques at the time that they just got better at and used on UFOs and aliens. So fun watch, a short watch for an Area 52 episode, and full of fun stuff. It's a fun story, even if we are really just suspending our disbelief and it's not a magic trick. It's fun. It's a fun watch. It's a fun read. It's a fun listen. It's a fun story.